The last thing you will ever see before your soul is taken is a light, warm, familiar, and completely engineered. Ancient Gnostic masters called it the Archons' greatest weapon. Not fire, not darkness, not pain, but something so beautiful, so perfectly designed to feel like home, that almost no soul has ever refused it. There is a moment every human being will eventually face. A moment beyond argument, beyond belief, beyond the comfort of any religion or philosophy you have ever been handed. It is the moment your body stops and something else begins. And for thousands of years, the people who claim to understand what happens in that moment told you the same story. A light appears. You move toward it. And on the other side, something beautiful is waiting. But what if that story was never told to free you? What if it was told to make sure you never even thought to question the door before you walked through it? The Gnostics were not a single group. They were scattered communities. Mystics, seekers, and philosophers spread across the ancient Mediterranean world, flourishing most powerfully between the 1st and 4th centuries of the Common Era. They were not unified by a single leader or a single church. What unified them was a question so dangerous that the institution which eventually rose to power in the name of Christ spent centuries burning their texts, executing their teachers, and erasing their names from history. That question was simple. What if the world you live in was not made by the true God? What if the creator of this reality was something else entirely? The answer they arrived at was radical. The physical universe, the one you see and touch and suffer inside every single day, was not the creation of the highest divine source. It was built by a lesser being, a being of enormous power but profound ignorance. The Gnostics called this being the demiurge, from the Greek word meaning craftsman or artisan, and they described him not as evil in the conventional sense, but as blind to the infinite realms of pure light and consciousness that existed above his own domain, blind to the true source from which all genuine creation flows. And most dangerously of all, blind to the fact that inside every human being he had shaped from matter and dust, there burned a spark that did not belong to him. That spark was divine. It came from the pleroma, the fullness, the infinite realm of pure light that existed before the demiurge, before the material world, before time itself. And because that spark was not his, because it carried a frequency he could not manufacture or control, the demiurge built an entire system designed to keep it trapped. Not through force, not through chains or walls, but through something far more sophisticated, through forgetfulness, through recycling, through the wheel of death and rebirth that the Gnostics identified as the most elegant prison ever constructed. The text recovered in 1945 from the Egyptian desert near the town of Nag Hammadi gave the modern world its first direct encounter with these teachings. Hidden inside sealed clay jars for over 1,600 years, these documents were not the ramblings of fringe mystics. They were sophisticated theological and cosmological treatises written by people who had thought deeply and dangerously about the nature of reality and the fate of the human soul. The Apocryphon of John, the Hypostasis of the Archons, the Gospel of Philip, the Pistis Sophia. Each of these texts carried fragments of a map not for navigating the living world, but for navigating what comes after it. And what they described about what comes after death is nothing like what you've been told. According to the Gnostic vision, the moment a human being dies, the soul does not simply float freely into an open and welcoming universe. It enters a territory, a structured, governed, carefully maintained territory that exists between the physical world and the higher realms of light. And this territory is not empty. It is populated by beings the Gnostics called Archons, from the Greek word for rulers or authorities. These were not angels in the way most people understand that word. They were not servants of the true source. They were the administrators of the demiurge's system, cosmic bureaucrats of kind, beings of enormous intelligence and power whose entire function was to ensure that the divine sparks housed inside human souls did not escape the cycle. The Archons were described in various Gnostic texts in strikingly consistent ways. They were shapeshifters. They were imitators. They could not create original forms of beauty or light, but they could copy them with terrifying precision. And this ability, the Gnostics warned, was the cornerstone of the trap. Because the moment your soul separates from your body, something happens that no one around you in your ordinary life will have prepared you for. The personality dissolves. The memories of this particular lifetime begin to blur and fade. The identity you spent decades building, your name, your relationships, your achievements and failures, all of it softens and recedes like a dream you're trying to hold on to after waking. And in that dissolving, in that sudden vastness of post-death awareness, the soul is vulnerable in a way it has never been during physical life. It is open. It is searching. It is looking for something to orient itself around. Something familiar. Something that feels like home. And the Archons know this. They have always known this. What appears first is described across dozens of Gnostic and related texts with remarkable consistency. A light. Not just any light. A light of breathtaking warmth and beauty. A light that seems to carry within it every good thing you ever longed for. Safety, belonging, reunion, recognition, the sense that you have finally arrived somewhere you were always meant to be. And moving within that light, or sometimes emerging from it, are figures. Faces you recognize, voices you love, the people who defined your life, who shaped your heart, who left you before you were ready to lose them. They are smiling. They are calling your name. They are telling you that everything is all right now, that you are home, that you are safe. The Gnostics would look at this scene and say one thing: do not move, because what you are seeing is not heaven. What you are seeing is a projection, a masterwork of cosmic imitation crafted by beings who have had thousands upon thousands of years to perfect the art of luring souls back into the wheel. The faces of your loved ones are not your loved ones. They are echoes, resonant frequency patterns drawn from the memories that are dissolving inside you in those very moments. The light itself is not the light of the pleroma. It is a counterfeit, brilliant and convincing, yes, designed to trigger every longing your human life ever produced inside you, but counterfeit nonetheless. The true light of the pleroma, the Gnostics described as something fundamentally different in quality, not dazzling but awakening. Not demanding, but liberating. The false light pulls at you. It creates urgency. It produces in the soul a sense that you must move toward it, that hesitation is wrong, that questioning is unnecessary. The true light does none of these things. It simply is, and in its presence, rather than dissolving further, the soul begins to remember. Rather than forgetting more, it starts to recognize something ancient and essential about what it actually is. This distinction, the Gnostics believed, was the entire game. The soul that recognized the counterfeit could pause, could question, could turn its awareness away from the engineered warmth and search instead for the higher radiance that no Archon could fabricate. But the soul that followed the false light without question, drawn by grief and longing and the desperate human need for reunion and safety, would enter the gate. And beyond the gate was the mechanism. The life review is something that appears not only in Gnostic texts, but in an enormous range of near-death experiences documented across the modern world. Countless people who have briefly crossed the threshold and returned describe the same essential phenomenon. A panoramic replay of their entire life. Every significant moment, every choice, every relationship, every moment of love, and every moment of cruelty, seen from the outside and from the inside simultaneously, felt in full, including the emotions of everyone their actions ever affected. This experience is almost universally described as profoundly meaningful, as genuinely illuminating, as something that produces in the soul a clear and undeniable understanding of what it did well and what it failed to do, what lessons it absorbed and what lessons it did not. And at the end of this review, in many accounts, comes a sense of what must happen next, a sense that there is more to learn, more to correct, more to experience, a sense that returning to a physical body, to a physical life, is not just necessary, but right, even desired. The Gnostics would say this is the most sophisticated layer of the entire trap, because who is conducting the life review? That is the question almost no one asks in the moments it is happening. The experience feels internal. It feels like self-examination. It feels like truth. But the Gnostics warned that the Archons had mastered the art of making their influence feel like your own thoughts, like your own conclusions, like your own soul's judgment, when in reality, the framework inside which you are experiencing and evaluating your life is a framework they constructed. The standards against which you are measuring yourself are standards they defined. The sense of incompleteness, of unfinished business, of lessons not yet learned, is not a genuine assessment of your soul's spiritual state. It is a program. It is code. It is the mechanism by which the soul convinces itself that returning is the right thing to do. And then it returns, with its memories wiped, with its divine origin forgotten, with the spark of the pleroma buried so deeply beneath layers of new personality, new relationships, new fears, and new desires, that it may spend another entire lifetime without ever once catching a glimpse of what it actually is. This is the wheel. This is what the Gnostics called the cycle of necessity, and they were unanimous in their assessment of it. It was not a school. It was not a path of spiritual growth. It was a harvesting system, a mechanism by which the Demiurge and his Archons maintained their dominion over the divine sparks they could not create and could not destroy, but could, through endless cycles of incarnation and forgetfulness, keep perpetually unconscious of their own nature. The concept of karma, so widely embraced in both ancient Eastern traditions and modern spiritual culture, takes on an entirely different character inside the Gnostic framework. In Buddhist and Hindu cosmology, karma is the great teacher. It is the force that ensures justice across lifetimes, that rewards virtue and creates the conditions for a soul's eventual liberation through accumulated wisdom and purification. The Gnostics saw it differently. They did not deny that actions produce consequences, but they identified the karmic system as something that had been co-opted, turned into a tool of entanglement rather than liberation. Each action producing an echo that tied the soul more tightly to the material realm. Each echo becoming a reason to return. Each return creating new echoes. The wheel spinning not toward freedom, but in an endless orbit around the same gravitational center. This is why, in texts like the first Apocalypse of James discovered among the Nag Hammadi scriptures, the awakened soul is given specific instructions for what to say when it encounters the Archons after death. Not prayers, not confessions, not requests for mercy. Declarations, statements of origin and identity that the Archons could not refute, because the Archons had power over souls that did not know what they were, over souls that accepted the framework of judgment and guilt and incompleteness. But they had no power over a soul that remembered its true nature. A soul that could look at the engineered light and the projected faces and the cosmic courtroom of the life review and say, with complete and unshakable clarity, I know what this is and I know what I am, and I do not belong to your system. That recognition, the Gnostics called gnosis, not belief, not faith, not the acceptance of doctrine on the authority of someone else's word. Direct knowing, the kind of knowledge that arises not from the intellect, but from a level of awareness deeper than thought. The remembrance of something the soul has always known, but has been systematically prevented from accessing throughout each incarnation. And the Gnostics were clear that this knowing was not reserved for the specially gifted or the spiritually advanced. It was available to any human being willing to turn their attention inward and ask the question that the entire system of control was designed to prevent them from ever taking seriously. Who am I beneath all of this? What is the nature of the awareness that is reading these words right now? Where does it come from and where does it belong? These questions, asked with genuine sincerity and held with patient attention, were the tools of liberation, not rituals. Not initiations into secret societies, not the accumulation of esoteric knowledge for its own sake. The actual practice was interior. It was the cultivation of a quality of presence that could not be manipulated by external illusions, however beautiful and convincing those illusions might be. And the Gnostics believed that this practice, developed during life, would persist into death, that a soul trained in inner recognition would carry that training into the post-death state, would pause when the false light appeared, would feel its pull and not be moved by it, would look through it and beyond it towards something quieter and older and infinitely more real. There is a detail in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the ancient Buddhist text known in Tibetan as the Bardo Thodol, that mirrors the Gnostic warning with extraordinary precision despite arising from an entirely different cultural and religious tradition. The text describes the soul in the days immediately following death encountering a series of lights. Some of these lights are brilliant and overwhelming. Others are softer and less dazzling. And the text specifically warns the soul not to be drawn toward the brilliant lights, which it identifies as projections of conditioned consciousness, but to move instead toward the softer, more subtle radiances, which it identifies as the light of pure awareness itself. The parallel is not exact. The cosmological framework is different in important ways, but the essential warning is the same. Not all light is what it appears to be, and the most dangerous light is the one that most perfectly resembles what you have always hoped to find. What does this mean for how you live right now, in this body, in this life, reading these words? The Gnostics were not fatalists. They did not believe the trap was inescapable. If they had, they would not have bothered to write anything down. The entire purpose of their teachings was to give the soul the one thing the Archons could not take from it once it was genuinely established: awareness. The kind of awareness that does not flinch from difficult questions, that does not reach for comfort at the cost of clarity, that can sit with the discomfort of not knowing and remain present and attentive rather than grasping for the nearest answer that makes the discomfort stop. Every time you practice that kind of presence, something strengthens inside you that no external system can manufacture or manipulate. Every time you question a story you have been handed rather than accepting it, because acceptance is easier, you exercise the same capacity that the Gnostics believed would determine the fate of your soul at the moment of death. Every time you notice the pull of a beautiful illusion and pause rather than follow, you are rehearsing for the most important moment you will ever face. The Archons in the Gnostic vision are not supernatural villains in a cosmic horror story. They are a system, a sophisticated, self-perpetuating system of control that operates through the exploitation of the soul's deepest longings. The longing for home, the longing for reunion, the longing for the feeling that everything is finally, completely, permanently all right. These longings are not weaknesses. They're the natural expressions of a divine spark that knows, at some level beneath conscious thought, that it does not belong in the prison it finds itself in. The tragedy is that the system uses those very longings as the mechanism of its own perpetuation. It promises the thing the soul is most desperate for, and delivers instead a door back into the cycle. To know this is not to kill hope. It is to redirect it, to stop looking for the pleroma in the counterfeit light and start looking for it in the one place the Archons cannot follow: inward, into the awareness that was never born and will never die, into the spark that does not belong to the demiurge and cannot be recycled by his system if it remembers what it is. The ancient warning is not designed to frighten you. It is designed to prepare you, to give you, in this lifetime before the moment arrives, the knowledge that might make all the difference when it does. Because when the light appears, and it will appear, the only question that will matter is whether you remember what you are looking at. The Gnostics sealed this knowledge in desert jars and died protecting it, not to keep it from you, but for the possibility that one day the right soul would find it at the right moment. Perhaps that moment is now. Carry this with you, not as fear, as preparation, as the quiet certainty of someone who knows what the light is before it appears. If this opens something in you, leave your reflection in the comments. And if you're ready to go deeper, subscribe to Gnostic Inner Eye, because what is coming next pulls this thread even further. The light will come. The only question is whether you will remember what it is. Stay awake.